Maybe you need to move back so it's not so loud. But, no, they were talking about postponing or canceling this. Yesterday, I got to thinking, you know, I've put in enough work, I'm ready to go. If I have to come down here and do this by myself, it's gonna happen. So, but no, I'm glad everybody's here today. Thanks Bonnie and Richard for, and the Sturgis Area Arts Council, and Dr. Christopher Hahn, and the Public Library for inviting me and the troops to be here today. I hope you'll find something to be informed by and entertained, because really that's what historical toys are all about. And it's appropriate that we're here today, because we're on the cusp of the traditional Christmas shopping season, and you know, Black Friday is a week from today, if I'm correct. But so anyway, we'll get into this. And, back in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about is was a good bet to show up under the Christmas tree. And I consider that time period to be one of the golden eras or golden ages of toys. You know, there was so much out there that you know, Easy Bake Oven, and my wife has a good family story about Easy Bake Ovens. I guess her and her sisters and her brothers fought over the Easy Bake Ovens because they didn't wrap anything in their family. They had 9 kids, and they just put it in piles in the living room floor. And the girls got Easy Bake Ovens, and the boys apparently wanted them, so, which makes sense because her mom was a caterer and a cook, and they owned a restaurant, and probably it was a family thing apparently. So, and there was, you know, Light Bright, and those Green Army men that everybody stepped on. Your parents yelled at you when they stepped on your Army men, and Hot Wheels cars, and the whole bit. So, and of course, Barbie and Ken and their massive fashion empire, and a lot of the stuff you'll still see on the store shelves and the online shopping sites today. So, and that's especially true with the genre popularly known as action figures. You know, those are posable toys representing characters from comic books, popular movies, TV shows, you know, all designed to foster imaginative play, and as well as infinite sales for adult collectors. And Deb's rolling her eyes right now. So without further ado, let's tell the story of what's known as the original action figure, G.I. Joe. Forgive me for what I'm going to do to French here, but on the banks of Rousseau de l'Aumont, approximately 7,400 kilometers west of Paris, a handful of American soldiers from the 1st Division, 639th Regiment, defended Rousseau de l'Aumont, a vital waterway from the threat of repeated attacks by a superior number of enemy forces. The unit deployed patrols in the often heavy underbrush on the banks of the waterway, manned checkpoints, and aided headquarters by providing vital intelligence from forward observation posts, often in inclement weather. The unit captured and interrogated enemy soldiers and provided first aid to wounded comrades. This heroic unit, small in number and even smaller in height, held its ground, making the defense of Dead Man Creek, as it became known, a great strategic victory for Allied forces. So this story I just told is based very loosely on actual events, and well, it actually took place in 1967, but that's, it could have been born of active imaginations of young boys growing up in the 60s, like the 3 or 4 of us who grew up in Fulton Street and the Shady Rest Trailer Court with our G.I. Joe action soldiers. Interest in World War II was at a peak back then, and war-based television dramas, movies, Combat, The Lieutenant, Gallant Men, 12 O'Clock High, and Rat Patrol were almost as popular as the TV westerns of the day. And even McHale's Navy and Hogan's Heroes and and Gomer Pyle, USMC, kind of added to that, that popularity. So if anybody has any comments or questions as we go through here, feel free to speak up. So the story of G.I. Joe actually starts in Providence, Rhode Island in 1963. Don Levine, an up-and-coming product design and development director for Hassenfeld Brothers, saw a way for the company to jump into the currently popular market for military-themed toys, including those little green army men that we talked about. Levine was friends with Elliot and Ruth Handler, husband and wife co-owners of Mattel Incorporated on the West Coast, which was riding the wave of sales success with their Barbie and Ken dolls and accessories first introduced in 1959. I think Ken came along in 61 or 62 or something like that. So Levine decided to investigate the possibility of producing a 12-inch tall figure for boys similar in size to Barbie and Ken. And he was told repeatedly by nearly everybody he spoke to about this that boys will not play with dolls. And even his boss, Merrill Hassenfeld, who was the second generation owner of what became known as Hasbro, had a standing rule for the toy division, which was already known for, they did the Mr. Potato Head, Light Bright, and they also did those paint-by-number sets, if you remember those. Anyway, he said Hassenfeld Brothers, he said, is not in the doll business. But Levine was undaunted. He took advantage of Hassenfeld's extended trip out of the country. And while the boss was away, and with the help of designer Stan Weston, who's in the center there, set about designing his toy soldier. Also recruiting the help of fellow employees, model makers, engineers, and even a receptionist who was good with a sewing machine. Levine, Weston, and the rest of the team made a pact at the start of this project to never use the word doll in reference to it. They picked out the term action figure. So their figure was to be articulated with movable joints to make it posable, and hands were designed to grip and hold accessories. So they gave Joe a broad-shouldered, beefy build, military-style haircut, and enhanced the tough guy image with a facial scar. And all four branches of the military would be represented with different uniforms. Because they knew if they didn't do something, some other company would. And one of the other things they did,
Did they all four branches have the scar? They were
yes, yeah,
really?
Every figure has the scar.
I just didn't remember that.
So, and the other thing they did, this was actually kind of a mistake, but they left it in. If you look on some of the hands that you'll see on these figures, the thumbnail is on the inside.
Oh,
It's like the thumb is inverted. And that was originally a mistake in the molding process, but they decided to leave it in there. This is a way to thwart copycats. So,
oh.
Jim, do you talk about the posable arms later in reference to Ken, or can I share that?
go ahead.
So Jim said he liked the Ken doll that Kathy had, but Ken could only signal a touchdown.
Or he could surrender, or he could hail a taxi. And with his legs, there were no knee joints, so I guess the other thing he could do was goose step, which is
Right. I remember that because I got the Barbie doll, but my older sister got the Ken doll, so we played together with them all the time. And
yeah, that wasn't it.
Ken could never be very aggressive.
Maybe they planned it that way.
Yeah.
So when Merrill Hassenfeld returned from his overseas trip, there was some office scuttlebutt going on. He knew something was up. So Levine finally made his pitch to produce his toy soldier and a series of accessories to be out in time for the 1964 toy fair. And this was a stretch for Hasbro at the time because they were going to produce this overseas. And they had never done anything like that before. So I think Singapore or Hong Kong, I think, was another area where they actually produced these things to start. So Anyway, after a few tense weeks of consideration, Hassenfeld finally gave Levine the go-ahead. And they named him, he was named G.I. Joe. That was actually early in the process. One of the other people came up with just as kind of a working title, I guess. Let's see how we doing on G.I. Joe here. And of course, that was a commonly known term back then from the movie. There was a writer, war correspondent, Ernie Pyle, coined the term. And G.I. Joe was government issue Joe or general issue Joe. I think there's a number of variations on that. Became the everyman soldier, the grunt in the foxhole, just the everyman guy who was fighting the war. So and then when they went into this, they were going to follow the retail trail blazed by the Barbie and Ken, and they also produced just a ton of accessories. And the figures sold for $2.99, and I remember the accessories were, I don't know, $1.50, $1.99, but you couldn't just buy one to make a complete figure. You had to buy several of these accessory packs. So, and the image on the left, I guess in the toy industry, the figures were known as razors. If you sell a razor, you will sell lots of blades, now and forever, to go with it.
Yes.
And that's what the accessories were. The accessories were the blades. These toys were heavily advertised, and we'll go into that now, I hope.
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
G.I. Joe attack! Boom, boom! G.I. Joe takes the hill! Bam, bam! Horrific battle!
Terrific equipment to have a battle with. When you get G.I. Joe and the authentic G.I. Joe equipment, you'll have the greatest realism, the greatest fun you ever had in playing soldier. Box after box of authentic uniforms and equipment, so you can change your G.I. Joe soldier into a camouflage Marine ready for battle, a Navy frogman with complete scuba suit and inflatable life raft, an Air Force pilot with high-altitude helmet and air vest. Get G.I. Joe and get G.I. Joe equipment, so you can set up exciting battle action whenever you want. Remember, only G.I. Joe is G.I. Joe.
We never had that many when we were playing. But anyway, the advertising paid off. I guess sales that first year, 1964, were through the roof. About $17 million, I think, is what I saw. And like other kids, at that time, I got my first Joe for Christmas in 1966, and of course, every birthday, holiday beyond that, it was you knew what to give me, was the accessories or something to that effect. And I get a lot of this information from this book, which actually came with one of the later versions that they did. It was kind of the 30th anniversary edition, and included this book, and it had the whole story by the creator Don Levine, and then a writer, John Mitchlick, something like that. So, and one of the things I got in subsequent years was on the end there's a motorcycle with sidecar. I got that from my aunt in New York, and when it got here, one of the forks on the motorcycle was broken. So instead of sending it back, we just taped it up with, I don't know, duct tape, masking tape, whatever, and just rolled with it. So anyway, I was able to get some replacement parts, or I found a junker later on and replaced it. So and one of my cousins lived on a farm near Madison, and he had a G.I. Joe. And one day he got the idea that he was going to make a parachute for his G.I. Joe. So he made his parachute, threw it out the second-story window of his farmhouse there, and it didn't end well. So, of course, a bunch of my friends had these too, and we all had different things, so we all brought different assets to the battle for Dead Man Creek, if you will. So, and I remember here in town, I think Ben Franklin and the Lee Store, Gibson's Discount Center, I think had the line, Lushbow's Hardware and Haley's Hardware, I think also had some. So you could buy them pretty much anywhere in town. The other thing I remember was in 1967, there was a promotion for the movie The Dirty Dozen. I don't know if you remember that one with, well, it was Lee Marvin and Ernest Borgnine and Charles Bronson. It was a pretty heavyweight cast for a film back then. And it was the story of a bunch of Army prisoners in World War II, American prisoners who were recruited for a suicide mission behind enemy lines. And that's why they were called the Dirty Dozen. Well, they came up with a promotion. They were going to toss 12 GI Joes out of a helicopter or something in rapid with parachutes, you know, just to kind of publicize the movie.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like the WKRP tribute.
Yes.
And I begged my folks to let me go down there, because if you caught one of these things, you could keep it. So, and they said, no, we're not going down to Rapid on Saturday. The chances of you getting one of those things is, you know, like winning the lottery. So, and I didn't get to go. And I tried to find some information on it. I couldn't find it if it actually happened or where it happened. I think it might have been at Bacon Park, if I remember right.
What did they drop them out of, an airplane?
Airplane or a helicopter or something.
Okay.
Anyway, sales continued from the original figures for several years, but by 1969, military toys were falling out of favor, and that had to do with the building descent to the Vietnam War. And Hasbro decided to take G.I. Joe in a different direction, and they called it the Adventure Team line of figures. Instead of a strictly military, they became private pilot, race car driver, mountaineer, river and jungle explorer, wild animal tamer, just all kinds of things. And the Adventure Team Joe, they had a company in England that would put the flocking on the head instead of just having painted hair. And so he had a bushy head of hair and a beard, and I think Tom has a few of those.
Yeah,
So.
can I pass mine around?
You have. So the Adventure Team line continued for several years, but the whole 12-inch line of figures was eventually disconnected.
That's something.
Obviously, I'm not an Adventure Team guy.
Yeah.
He's up there, he sends his pictures.
Yeah, he's on it.
Yeah.
Spotted right away.
But the whole 12-inch line of figures was discontinued in 1978.
So that really didn't last very long then?
No, it really didn't. It really didn't. Well, you know, things are kind of fickle sometimes. I know Barbies are still going strong and still here forever. So, anyway, there was one, the whole line, the Adventure Team line and the original line remains pretty popular with collectors. And the Holy Grail for collectors from the original line was the 1967 GI Nurse figure with medical gear, accessories, extremely rare because they didn't sell. They brought them out, boys wouldn't touch them because it was a girl doll. The action girl, they called it, had what they call rooted hair, you know, actual kind of simulated hair instead of just having it painted. So the boys wouldn't touch it. The girls wouldn't go for anything that was on display with the G.I. Joe stuff, the boy stuff. So anyway, I haven't seen one of these in person. I see them online a lot. See, just the figure itself will go for something around $3,000 to $4,000.
Sure.
And if you got the whole set, which is shown here with all the gear and everything, you're nudging close to the 5-figure route. So.
Can I pass that one around too? Just kidding. Just kidding. I don't have one of those.
I don't need to leave that locked in your car. anyway, from there, there were other companies that were getting into the action figure. I think the Star Wars movie franchise was inspired from this. And they actually, the movie people offered the right to produce the figures to another company, but they turned it down. They gave it to Kenner, finally got it. And they marketed some, I think, 4 original figures from the original movie to come out about the time that the movie came out. And then they introduced 8 more, and they had 12 altogether from that first movie. Those figures sold well enough that George Lucas, the executive producer, used some of the proceeds from those sales to fund the making of the next 2 movies. Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back.
And who produced them? Who produced the
Kenner.
action figures?
Kenner, for the Star Wars.
But that was not Hasbro who did that?
No, they had kind of gotten out of it. But
Okay.
then they jumped back into it. Once they saw how well the Star Wars figures did, it came out with a much smaller version of G.I. Joe. It was a 3 3/4 inch figure with different, it still had the mobility. These in the picture are actually keychains. That's the only ones holding the 3 3/4 figures that I have. But it was kind of a military, kind of a superhero kind of a thing. Called G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero. It's part military, part superhero. They were battling an evil organization called Cobra, and Cobra stands for something, and I haven't quite figured out what it is. It was, of course, trying to take over the world. Stop me if you've heard that scenario before. Taking another cue from the movie, from the Star Wars series, they actually put out a series of action cartoons. They had a couple of full-length, both live-action and animated movies that are based on G.I. Joe, the Real American Hero battling the evil forces of Cobra. And I think those shows were available on YouTube. I think they were on TV until not too long ago, might have been 3-4 years. But anyway, those 3 3/4 inch figures were discontinued in 1998, so they had a pretty good run. But like with the 12-inch figures, their demise would only be temporary. The 12-inch figures came back in the mid-90s as a 30th anniversary collection, and aimed at collectors and baby boomers like me, in the wave of nostalgia. And they did a lot of commemorative ones. You see Bob Hope there, airborne at Normandy. The Navajo Code Talker actually talks.
Surabachi secured. What can not that request their support? What can that request artillery support? Surabachi secured.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
I hope that's Navajo. So, anyway. So they had the collection. They had this, lost my train of thought there for a second, okay. The classic collection. Anyway, they had so many of them, and that's where I kind of got interested in it, because there were so many that were really interesting to me, and they're better detailed than the earlier ones. And you'll see in the sidecar, there's it looks like a war correspondent photographer depicted, and of course, being a newsman myself, I saw that and boom, had to have that one. So, and that's kind of where it all started with the classic collection.
Was these very successful?
I think they were very successful. They continued them for about 10 years, and they're just really starting to come up in the collector line now. And they sold a lot of them. And they even had another nurse. This was a Vietnam era nurse wearing fatigues. And what was the show that was based on it?
MASH with.
MASH was
with
one.
Houlihan, Hot Lips.
There was another one, there was
Was set
another
in
one later on,
Vietnam.
more serious.
China Beach.
China
Yes,
Beach.
yeah, that's the one. So, and that one's not near as rare and not near as pricey as the earlier one, so. So that's basically where the, Hasbro continues to produce the G.I. Joe name. They have all these different series. The latest one that they did called the Classified series came out in 2018. And they're still going, and they range from the 3 3/4 inch size figure. They have some bigger ones, 6 and 7 inch. I'm really not into those at all, so I don't know. They're still kind of the, see, this is kind of what they're doing now, the ninja, yeah, that sort of thing, so. I don't know, my collection started, I guess I found my original ones, and they had a lot of playware, and were in a pretty bad state of disrepair, so all I really wanted to do was just trying to repair and restore what I had, and I have a friend down in Rapid who was a big collector at the time, and he led me to a lot of sources for these things. He had a lot of stuff, and either sold it to me for a very good price or just gave it to me because he had so much. And then once I discovered those classic collection figures, it got out of hand from there and got again. So anyway, we also had G.I. Joes. We bought some for the boys when they were growing up back in the 90s when they kind of had that 30th anniversary collection again. And I still have those as well. And they needed some repair, so I've got those in the cabinet at home as well. So that's kind of something that they had. We're going to end with, this is called the Ultimate Action Toy. Inspired, I'm sure, by G.I. Joe, and this is what it led to, I guess, was Ideal's Evel Knievel stunt cycle. And introduced in the mid-70s, when Evel Knievel was at the height of his popularity and making all of the jumps over, buses at Wembley Stadium, over the fountains at Caesar's Palace, and that 1974 jump, or attempted jump over the Snake River in what was essentially a ballistic missile. He made 75 ram-to-ram jumps in the course of his career, and I think that's about as many bones as he broke as well. So, toy was initially produced by Ideal from 1973 to 78 initially, and sold millions. They have a whole line. They had a scramble van, a jet cycle, funny car, and a short-lived stunt rider female called Daring. And since then, or recently, a company called California Creations has re-released the stunt cycle made from the original Ideal molds. And a good friend of mine from Pierre, Chad Koppas, recently retired as chief photographer for South Dakota Tourism. And he's also a toy collector. He's made some awesome videos of his evil stunt cycle jumps, and we're going to enjoy one now.
still making these, and you said that what are the themes that they're looking at that they make now?
Well, it's kind of the superhero, ninja, something a little more cartoonish rather than something that's authentic, you know, military reproduction. I think they get away from, you know, just, you know, like I say, the war toys kind of got out of favor in the late 60s and early 70s, and those cartoon superheroes seem to do pretty well consistently. So
Is there a transgender model?
not that I'm aware of.
Probably will be.
Jim, talk about your
Oh,
Teddy
okay.
Roosevelt and George Washington.
Okay, well, these are all part of the classic collection. They came out with all kinds of historical figures. I have George Washington, I have Robert E. Lee and General Grant facing each other, and also have a Johnny Reb and Billy Yank, you know, trying to just be equal, I guess. We have the two African American. You remember that the one side of the four representation of all four services? There, the one in the orange kind of Air Force jumpsuit was an African American. Well, they came out with that a couple of years into the whole deal in the 60s, and all they did was take the original figure and just mold it in a different color of plastic. They have a line now called the Tuskegee Airmen. These two figures here, the bomber pilot and the fighter pilot, and they're a little more, I tread lightly here, but a little more
Realistic.
A little more realistic. So, and some of these I get because of stories that I've done. This particular one is Airborne at Normandy. There was a guy that I did a story on at the Journal. He was in his mid to late 90s, I think, when I talked to him. It was the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and he made a jump into Normandy. And the story that he told, and just the way that he told it, was his name was Ralph Schwab, and just the way he was so matter of fact about it. And they were flying into Normandy, and this little C-47 that they were all on, they were going through horrendous flak from, you know, the Germans were shooting up everything that they had, and it sounded like somebody was throwing rocks against the side of the plane, and they said, "We got to get out of here, or we're going to go down with this thing." So they got out, they jumped, and it was a good thing they did, because there were other planes that waited a little longer, and they came down right in the middle of a village called Saint-Mary-Église, and that did not go well for them. A lot of them were killed before they even got to the ground. But Ralph fought his way through France, and he also made another jump into Sicily, I think, at some point. But anyway, he's passed on since then. And anyway, I got this one just as kind of in memory of Ralph. And,
Well, they were true heroes.
Yeah, they were.
definitely, they were. And what always astounds me with that is that a lot of them just came back from the war and just picked up where they left off. And of course, there were a lot that didn't, but there's so many of them just.
Matter of fact.
It was no big deal. We had a job to do, we went and did it, and now we're home.
In the historical ones, did they do World War I?
Yeah, I'm a doughboy
Okay.
here. That's about the only one they have, though. They have different versions. They have the campaign hat, and some other gear that I didn't bring with me. And this is the newer. Well, I guess this is an older Marine. We have G.I. Jane here, who's a helicopter pilot from the Gulf War type era. Navy Shore Patrol and Navy Blue Angel. So, and Navy Crash Crew. You know, they did a couple of different things. They did a deep sea diver, you know, with the big helmet with the windows and the whole bit. And then they also had a scuba diver in the rubberized wetsuit. Well, if you left your rubberized wetsuit on your figure too long, the rubber reacted with the plastic, and it stuck to it, and or it became brittle. So, I mean, if you've got a G.I. Joe with a rubber wetsuit on it, it's going to stay there. There's nothing you can do. No way to restore it or anything. So.
Jim, the thumbnail that you said was reversed, was that forever? Like all of them have that, or it was
I
something
don't think
corrected
so,
over
no, I
time?
think they went to the bigger, the kind of the rubberized, the kung fu grip that
Yeah.
you talked about, I don't think it was on there.
Okay.
So I think it was just on the original one, and like I said, I think it was a mistake, to
Yeah.
begin with, a mistake in the molding, and then they just left it,
Never heard that. That's cool.
so.
Not to say that Jim's been touched by this, but
Oh, yes, he has. Well, let's be real.
one night we were just sitting there talking and he goes, I wonder if my figures ever go out at night and on the river.
No, that was actually a reaction. I had posted a photo on Veterans Day. I think it was that photo. I posted it on Facebook, Veterans Day, just from me and my collection here. And somebody got on and said, nice doll collection, Jim. I said, no, they're not dolls, they're action figures. And he goes, oh, really? Do they actually move, or do they? And I said, well, no, but I suspect that at night they will go out and do missions. And then they'll be back in their original spot by morning. And
So we
somebody-
debated that.
So, somebody got on and said, boy, that just creeped me out.
That's why the neighbor's dog is barking.
Yeah, but it's all for the good of humanity.
I think Deb missed the opportunity to move some of those some night.
Yeah.
So they're all like at a dinner table or wherever when you get up in the morning,
Yes,
it's like,
yes.
oh,
Kind of like Elf on the Shelf.
Or that movie, A Night at the Museum.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
very much like that.
Live.
I think it's a great movie idea.
There was actually there was if you remember the movie Toy Story,
That's something,
Yes.
yes.
they have a lot of original '60s toys in there. I think what Mr. Potato Head, the Slinky Dog, of course Barbie and Ken were in there, and they were going to use G.I. Joe, but then Hasbro folks read the storyline and found out that the evil neighbor kid next door was going to blow up, use an M80 or something and blow up that, their figure. They said, no, we're not putting our name on this. So they had to come up with something else. They came up with Combat Carl instead. So, and of course, they came out with a Combat Carl figure when they did the movie stuff. So,
And tell me, why do you have two shuttles, or,
two,
yeah, don't you have two of those?
The little red cars.
No, the
space shuttle?
Space shuttle.
Oh, total space, yeah.
I thought
the
you had two
capsule?
of those, yeah.
I do.
Why?
Well,
This must be a story. It was the right price,
it
Debbie.
was this one I got from a friend of mine in Rapid. It's the original one. It's faded and it's all,
Yeah.
the instrument panel is all kind of crinkly and falling off. It's just a paper label. The other one I got was, it was a collection that I picked up through him. And it was a lady that was selling a bunch of stuff at a rummage sale. And she had one of those. And I have sold off a good share of it. A lot of it was kind of aftermarket stuff.
But you still have that?
I still have, and it's the newer version. It's the, we're at this era.
It's the newer version.
So,
That's wonder, that's wonder.
okay.
Jim, we've all read how much value the original packaging. So do you have in your mind there how much more an action figure would be
Well,
with that original
I
packaging?
I think these went, I think for $29.99, $39, maybe $50 back in the day. And I've just every once in a while check up on like eBay, and I see some of them anywhere from 150 to 200, maybe more. It just kind of depends.
So this is your retirement program?
It could be, yes. Deb hasn't made that decision yet.
Yeah, who gets them?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
So,
Well, how do you display them at home, or does Deb just put them in the closet and shut
you
them?
know, I found a couple of wooden cabinets with
With lighting.
I added the lighting. I went to Menards and got the LED lighting.
Sure.
And they're in the basement, and tours are available on my request.
Phenomenal fee.
You did.
Yeah. I gotta pay for this stuff somehow.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a great collection.
So anybody got a toy story they want to share? Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just have a question. You have so many of these super action movies coming out. My grandson loves them. Are there action figures being done for those?
I think so.
Okay.
I think, well, I mean, what Transformers are big now, that's the vehicles that will
Right.
transform into a, yeah. Transformers are big. Our grandson gets into these quite a bit, and I don't know if he's done the TV shows as much, but.
Like the Fab Four, don't they have?
Yeah.
those like
Is that
The
the red,
Marvel-
green, blue, and?
He
The
can't
Marvel-
help
You know,
himself,
Captain
it's
America,
genetic.
Genetic.
the Hulk,
Yeah, the
You
whole
know,
Marvel action.
Marvel
Right.
action
Yeah, Marvel
things.
Comics, Black
Yeah.
Panther. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
You go to, you take a walk through Walmart or Target, or especially on Ryan, and there's just aisles and aisles and aisles.
Okay.
I mean, Barbie just has a whole aisle to herself. I mean, her extended family must be huge at this point,
okay.
so.
I have one thing to show because it's like a one-of-a-kinder. When I was a kid, and I was into G.I. Joes like crazy, my grandma Tollefson made a Superman outfit for my little G.I. Joe because we couldn't find one anywhere, and I just really wanted a Superman outfit. So she put the snaps on and all that stuff, and so, yeah, I'm surprised I didn't.
And the
you know.
boots.
And the boots. There's a gay picture.
And the cape.
No, that's his, oh, this is his trunks.
Sure.
With a lot of proportion, I suppose. But yeah, so,
So would you introduce yourself to those of us that do not know you?
oh, yeah, as part of the witness protection program. I'm Tom Martin. I'm a deacon at Calvary Lutheran Church in Rapid City. And when I saw this coming up in the community section of events, I thought, I've got to go to this.
I've heard about you.
Yeah, most people have.
Name and the face now.
I'd appreciate it. We just keep those quiet.
Well, when I was growing up, what we had 5 kids and we had these dolls too, but my grandma made our doll clothes for us. And we still have it, my sister and I. My grandpa took a peach crate, they used to be wooden peach crate, and he made a little thin door and put a handle on it, and he formed little wire hangers for us. And one side, we could put our doll, and then the second section had a little wire across so we could hang her or his clothes in there. So we still have those. Yeah, we'll put contact paper over the top, pink contact paper for us. And so we, in my family, we didn't buy all the ready-made things.
Not for $1.99.
No, well, no. We weren't a wealthy family. We were just happy to get the one doll. Now I see these girls with 25 dolls, and I think, do you have as much fun playing with your one as we did? Because we would take them outside and pretend they were swimming, during the summer.
Well, I remember one of Jeff Foxworthy's routines.
Oh, really?
You remember him, you might be a redneck if, well, he grew up, his family was all young girls. He said you'd go in the bathroom, you'd go and take a shower, and the bathtub was loaded with, and this is what he put, it said, with naked Barbies. He said, oh, to be a G.I. Joe on a weekend furlough. I have to credit him, I'd love to take credit for that.
Well, in 1959, my sister and I each received, oh, be quiet, the original Barbie, the one you saw with the black and white striped swimming suit, and anyway, that was our Barbies. Well, it was put away, and I made the mistake of bringing it out for our daughter Ashley when she was too young to be responsible for it, and left it on the floor, and one of our puppies back then chewed the leg off, and then they come out with, if you have the original 1959 blonde Barbie with the swimming suit, it's worth And I'm going, what about without?
There went the college fund.
And the dog.
My sister had the Ken and the Barbie, and the Ken that she had a sailor suit
Yeah.
with a little duffel bag, and we were so desperate for people at that point that we tried to incorporate Ken with his non-movement into our situations, but it just never really worked out. Well, there was a whole dress whites in a combat zone thing. A lot of times he wound up on a stretcher. I think he may have gotten beaten up a lot. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with these, and we're pretty hard on them, but then that's what they're for, is to play with. And I always run into, well, like Tom, I run into stories about people, yeah, I had one of those, and I think even Chris was telling, Chris Holland was talking about, he always wanted the capsule, so that might be a place to go for one of my extra capsules. Anyway,
Oh, that's great.
Any more comments? Anybody else got a story they want to tell about their toys? Thank you. What a wonderful program, Jim. It's a super program. So on behalf of the Arts Council, here's a little gift for you. Thanks for coming. I think really, tell people, have them come to our programs. This is a great story, remembering the Christmas catalogs where we went through and we earmarked the pages and circled the toy and we wanted. It was a wonderful era of toys and catalogs, and a lot of dreaming went on with those Christmas catalogs, that's for sure.